Hi everyone, welcome to this module on boot volumes. We have already covered boot volumes in under the compute lecture series, so I'll really go through this really fast because we already covered it. But if you haven't yet watched that lecture series, it's good to recap some of the key points here. So compute instance is launched using operating system image stored on the remote boot volume. Right? We talked about this earlier. You have a compute instance. You have a block volume where you keep your data and applications. And then you have boot volume, which is a special kind of a block volume where your operating system is stored. Uh, and the boot volume is created automatically and associated with an instance until you terminate the instance. And all the characteristics of block volume carry over to the boot volume. Um, if you want to launch another instance with a boot volume, first what you have to do is create a custom image of your boot volume, and then using the custom image, you can launch the new instance, right? Alternatively, you can launch a new instance directly from an unattached boot volume if you don't wish to create a custom image, right? So those two options are available. Delete boot volume, you can delete an unattached boot volume, and you can optionally choose to automatically delete the boot volume when terminating an instance by selecting the checkbox in the delete confirmation dialog, right? We have seen this in some of the earlier demos. Uh, if a boot volume is directly attached to an instance, you cannot delete it, right? Makes straightforward. And then all the things you could do with block volumes, you could do with boot volumes, right? So you could do manual backups, you could do a policy-based backup, you could create clones of boot volumes. Uh, There are a couple of things you could do with boot volumes. You could use attach a boot volume to an instance as a block volume for troubleshooting, right? This comes up in the exam. If you have a boot volume which is having an issue, how do you do troubleshooting? You can follow some of these steps here, and I'm not going to go into these details because we covered this in some of these in the compute module. You could attach the boot volume to an instance as block volume and do troubleshooting. We also looked into this earlier. You could create custom boot volumes. The default size for Linux is 46 gig. For Windows is 256 gig, but nothing stops you from going all the way, let's say, to 32 terabyte. You don't need that much space, but you can of course go well beyond the default sizes. So with that, let me quickly jump to the console and show you the boot volumes in action. We have again looked into these in the compute section, but let's quickly look into this again here. So if I go into my compute section, you can see boot volumes here, right? And remember, boot volumes are a special kind of block volumes where you keep your operating system and you boot from them, right? Other than that, everything else is exactly the same as block volumes. So as you can see here, you can assign a backup policy. You can create a backup. You could do cloning, and you can of course you can terminate the you can create a manual backup, etc. The reason some of these options are grayed out is because these instances are running. So if I find an instance, first thing I could do is I could delete an instance, and I could decide to keep the uh, boot volume. So if I come here, I can say terminate, and it says permanently delete the attached boot volume, right? I don't want to do that. So let me just terminate this instance and keep the boot volume, right? And I want to show you a couple of things we could do with that. So if I go here into the boot volume, probably would take a few seconds, but you would see that this boot volume would be now available, right? And I could come and create an instance out of that boot volume. And right here, I could do things like manual backups. So if I want to do a backup of the boot volume, I could just create a backup here, and there you go. I could create a backup of the boot volume. I could do clone. Looks like this boot volume is now available because the instance is terminated. I could actually create an instance out of this boot volume, right? And again, we have covered this in the compute section, but I could use the boot volume to spin up a new instance. So hopefully this gives you a quick overview of the boot volumes and how they behave. Um, if you haven't watched the compute lecture series, probably you should go watch that. We'll talk a little bit more in detail on the boot volumes. So with that, thank you so much for watching this lecture series on block volume. Hopefully you found it useful. Uh, if you have time, uh, please join me in the next lecture series where we talk about the OCI object storage service. Thank you.